The alley was a jagged scar between two brick buildings, slick with the grime of a city that never slept. Rain-soaked cardboard softened underfoot as Nora stumbled backward, her purse clutched to her chest like a shield. The three men closing in on her were shadows with sharp-toothed grins, their laughter echoing off the damp walls. She was trapped. A scream caught in her throat, a choked, useless thing. Just as the first man reached for her, another shadow detached itself from the mouth of the alley. "Leave her alone." The voice was calm, but it cut through the night with the edge of cold steel. Ethan Quinn moved with a quiet confidence that belied his simple clothes or worn jacket and jeans. He wasn't a large man, but he placed himself squarely between Nora and her tormentors. The first punch was a blur. Ethan took it on the jaw, his head snapping back. He didn't fall. He just reset his feet, his eyes locked on the men, drawing their fury onto himself. He absorbed their brutal assault, a silent bastion against their violence. A sickening crack echoed as a pipe met his ribs, and another blow sent his head slamming against the unforgiving brick wall. He crumpled to the ground, a final, defiant shield over Nora's legs. The sirens wailed in the distance, scattering the cowards into the night. Ethan woke to a world devoid of sound. The frantic beeping of the heart monitor was a frantic green line on a screen, not a pulse in his ears. The doctor's mouth moved, forming words that were nothing more than silent shapes. Nora's sobs were a tremor in the hand she pressed to her face, a visible quake of her shoulders. But the gut-wrenching sound was gone. The impact had severed his connection to the world of noise, plunging him into an abyss of profound silence. He was a hero, I told him. He was also deaf. Nora rarely left his side. She cradled his hand in hers, her tears falling onto his wrist. Her face, a canvas of profound guilt and gratitude, was the first thing he saw when he opened his eyes each morning. She learned basic sign language, her fingers fumbling through the alphabet, spelling out her remorse. IMSOSORRY. One afternoon, with the pale light of the hospital window striping the sterile room, Ethan took her hand. He couldn't hear her apologies anymore, but he could see the weight of them in the slump of her shoulders, in the dark circles under her eyes. He didn't want her guilt, he wanted her. He slowly formed the words, his voice raspy from disuse. It was worth it. Her eyes widened, brimming with fresh tears. He gazed into them, pouring every ounce of the love that had bloomed in the space of that one violent, life-altering night. "Nora Jensen," he said, his voice gaining a raw strength. "Marry me." The years that followed were a sun-drenched montage of their burgeoning love. They exchanged vows in a small, heartfelt ceremony at City Hall, pledging eternal devotion with written notes and fierce, clinging kisses. They built their life in a luxurious home that Ethan's surprising success in the stock market afforded them. Laughter, once silent to him, became something he saw in the crinkle of Nora's eyes. The birth of their son, James, was the brightest day of his life, a perfect, beautiful moment in his quiet world. He was a doting father, a loving husband. He was content. Then, one Tuesday, the silence broke. "The nerve regeneration is remarkable, Ethan," Dr. Matthews said, his voice a sudden, jarring intrusion into a world that had been muted for years. "Your hearing has returned to 100%. A medical miracle." Ethan sat still, the sounds of the office, the hum of the air conditioning, the distant traffic a roaring cacophony. He nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. He thanked the doctor, paid the bill, and walked out into the loud, vibrant city. He drove home, the secret of his recovery locked tightly behind his teeth. For reasons he couldn't yet articulate, some primal instinct urged him to wait, to watch, to listen from the silent fortress he had inhabited for so long. He continued the charade. At home, he remained the deaf husband, communicating through gestures and lip reading, a habit he had perfected, and he began to notice things. He saw Nora on the phone by the patio doors, her back to him, her voice a low, intimate murmur he could now faintly hear. She'd laugh, a soft, private sound he hadn't heard directed at him in months. When she saw him, she would end the call abruptly. Just a friend, she'd sign, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. He'd nod, the first chill of suspicion snaking its way around his heart. The chill became a shard of ice a week later. Ethan was on the floor, building a block tower with 5-year-old James. His son, with the guileless honesty of a child, looked up at him with wide, serious eyes. "Daddy," James said, his small voice perfectly clear to Ethan's restored ears. "Mr. Shaw said I'm going to have a little brother soon. He said Mummy has a surprise in her tummy, a name Colin Shaw, one of Nora's work friends." Slammed into Ethan with the force of a physical blow. A little brother, Mummy's surprise. The hushed phone calls, the recent distance in her touch. The pieces didn't just fall into place, they fused together with a sickening, molten heat, forging a truth that seared his soul. The world he had built, the family he had sacrificed his hearing for, was an elaborate, heartbreaking lie. A wave of nausea washed over him. The brightly colored blocks blurred. He could feel the blood draining from his face. He had to get out. He had to think. He pressed his fingers to his temple, feigning the onset of a headache, a common side effect of his old injury. Nora glanced over from the kitchen, her expression one of mild concern. Ethan gave her a weak smile, the muscles in his face feeling like brittle glass. He gestured toward the bedroom, a silent signal that he needed to lie down. She nodded, turning back to the sink. He retreated to their room, closing the door behind him. The sound of it clicking shut was like a coffin being sealed. He leaned against the wood, the weight of her deceit pressing down on him, crushing the air from his lungs. In the suffocating silence of his own making, Ethan Quinn began to disappear. The vibrant chaos of James's 5th birthday party felt like a personal assault to Ethan. Colorful balloons bobbed against the ceiling, a garish contrast to the grey storm brewing inside him. He sat on an ottoman in the corner, a placid, vacant smile fixed on his face, the perfect mask for a deaf man. From this vantage point, he had an unobstructed view of his wife, Nora, and Colin Shaw. They weren't even trying to be discreet. Colin's hand rested on the small of Nora's back, a gesture of casual ownership that made Ethan's blood run cold. Nora would laugh, a bright, tinkling sound he hadn't heard directed at him in months, and her eyes would sparkle with an intimacy reserved only for Colin. They moved as a unit, a magnetic field of betrayal that pulled them together, oblivious to the silent, watching husband they thought was lost in a world of silence. The grand finale arrived with the cake, a superhero-themed monstrosity ablaze with 5 candles. Guests gathered around, their voices a cheerful, muffled chorus of happy birthday. Nora held James, positioning him to blow out the flames. "Make a wish, sweetie," she cooed, her cheek pressed against his hair. James, cheeks puffed with importance, squeezed his eyes shut. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then, his eyes flew open, and he shouted with all the lung capacity a 5-year-old could muster, "I hope Mr. Shaw can be my dad this year." The singing died. A thick, suffocating silence fell over the room, broken only by a single, nervous cough. Nora's face went white with mortification, her grip on James tightening. Colin, however, couldn't suppress the smug, triumphant grin that spread across his face. He shot Ethan a look of pure pity and victory, a look that said, "Even the kid knows who the real man is." A shard of ice lodged itself in Ethan's chest. The pain was so sharp, so real, he almost gasped. Under the cover of the stunned silence, He watched Colin lean in close to Nora, his voice a low, conspiratorial murmur Ethan could hear as clearly as a gunshot. "Don't worry about it," Colin whispered, his lips practically brushing her ear. The poor deaf guy probably didn't hear a thing. He has no idea what's really going on. "I'll take care of you and James. We'll be a proper family," that was it. The final, brutal snap of a cord that had been fraying for a year. The brazen disrespect, the public humiliation, the theft of his son's heart, it all converged into a single, unbearable point of agony. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard a muscle pulsed in his cheek. His carefully constructed mask of deafness nearly shattered. He had to get out. Without a word or a look back, he stood and walked out of the house, the happy birthday song starting up again behind him. A mocking, hollow tune. Once outside, the cool night air did nothing to quell the inferno in his gut. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with cold, deliberate precision. "Leonard," he said, his voice raw and unfamiliar even to his own ears. "It's time. Erase him. Ethan Quinn is gone. As of this moment, he never existed." The next morning, Nora woke up to an empty space beside her in bed. Annoyance pricked at her. He'd probably gone to his mother's to sulk. She tried his number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Strange. She tried again. Same message. A knot of unease began to form in her stomach. By evening, it had blossomed into full-blown panic. His car was gone. His clothes were gone. She checked their joint accounts. All the funds he'd contributed had been withdrawn. Every digital trace, every official record she could think to check, had vanished. It was as if Ethan Quinn had been a phantom, a ghost she had only imagined. His disappearance coincided with the catastrophic collapse of the Jensen Group. It started with a key investor pulling out, citing a lack of confidence. Then another. It was a domino effect, a financial plague that swept through her family's company with terrifying speed. The phones in the office rang incessantly with furious creditors and panicked partners. The company that had been her father's legacy was bleeding out, and she had no idea how to stop it. Colin, in his infinite arrogance, tried to help. He swaned into board meetings with flimsy, ill-conceived marketing plans and name-dropped investors who had no interest in a sinking ship. "You're not listening, Nora," he'd insisted during one particularly dire meeting, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. "We just need a bold new campaign. A fresh face for the brand." Nora finally snapped. "The brand is insolvent, Colin," she yelled, the entire office falling silent. "The only thing your help has done is expose how little you know about anything. You were a distraction. A stupid, selfish distraction, and now everything is falling apart. Get out." He stared at her, stunned into silence, before retreating with his tail between his legs. The final blow came weeks later. A courier delivered a stark, manila envelope to her office. Her hands trembled as she tore it open, expecting another lawsuit. Instead, she pulled out the single, grim document. An official death certificate. Name: Ethan Quinn. Cause of death: accidental drowning. Location: unnamed river, Northern Province. The words swam before her eyes. The air rushed from her lungs. A high-pitched ringing filled her ears as the sterile, black and white text confirmed her worst nightmare. The world tilted on its axis and then went black. She woke to the antiseptic smell of a hospital room, a saline drip in her arm. Her mother sat by the bed, her face etched with grief. James, they told her, had also collapsed from the shock and was being cared for in the pediatric wing. The paper, the proof, had been too much for them. That as the fog of unconsciousness receded, it was replaced not by grief, but by a cold, burning rage. Nora sat up, ripping the fall from her arm. "It's a lie," she whispered, her voice a serrated edge. "Nora, darling," the police confirmed it. Her mother began softly. No. Nora's voice was suddenly powerful, filled with a terrifying certainty. She looked at her hands, at the life that was crumbling around her. Ethan wasn't weak. He wasn't the type to have an accident. He wouldn't just leave them. He was out there. Somewhere. This piece of paper was a tactic, a message, another layer to his impossible disappearance. He had abandoned them. Yes, but he was not dead, and she would find him. She would find him and drag him back to witness the ruin he had left behind. Saving the company was no longer just about legacy. It was about survival, and her survival depended on finding the ghost named Ethan Quinn. The silence in the house was a living thing, thick with dust and regret. Nora traced the rim of a cold coffee cup, the dregs a bitter mirror of her life. The front door clicked open, a sound so alien in the quiet that she flinched. It wasn't her key. Colin strode in, his expensive shoes echoing on the hardwood floors Ethan had laid himself. He wasn't alone. A woman, younger and glossier, clung to his arm, her gaze sweeping over the home with the detached appraisal of a prospective bear. "Colin, what are you doing here?" Nora's voice was a fragile whisper. A cruel, lazy smirk spread across his face. "Moving in. I thought I'd introduce you to my fiancée, Jessica." He gestured around the living room. "She loves what I've done with the place. Your place." The words caught in her throat. "This is my home." Ethan's home. Was. He corrected, his tone slick with false pity. "Funny thing about trust, Nora. It makes people sign things they don't read." He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto the coffee table. It was the Jensen Group share transfer agreement. Her signature, a careless flourish from a happier time, was a brand of shame. "You sign over everything. Your shares, your company, even this house, which was listed as a corporate asset, all to secure a loan that went directly to me." The air rushed from her lungs. A cold dread, sharp and absolute, pierced through the fog of her grief. "The designs, the ones that launched the company." Colin laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that desecrated the memories held within those walls. "Ethan was a brilliant architect. I'll give him that. A genius. But he was a terrible businessman. Content to work for scraps. I saw potential. His designs, your family name, a perfect combination. You were just the bridge between them. It was all there, laid bare in the cold light of his ambition. Every shared secret, every word of comfort, every promise he'd made after Ethan's death had been a calculated lie. She wasn't a partner he'd fallen for. She was a pawn he played. The shame was a physical weight, crushing her from the inside out. Her son, Leo, was asleep upstairs, a child conceived in a web of deceit. Her grief for Ethan was suddenly sharpened by a new, more profound agony. The realization that she had personally handed his legacy to the man who had destroyed them. Her hands clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms. The haze of victimhood burned away, replaced by a searing, defiant rage. "Get out," she said, her voice low and trembling. "I don't think so," Colin said, draping an arm around Jessica. "The eviction notice gives you 24 hours. You want me out." Nora stood, her spine straight for the first time in months. She met his smug gaze, her eyes blazing. "You'll get me out over my dead body," he chuckled, utterly unconcerned. "Don't be so dramatic, Nora. The locks will be changed by noon tomorrow." He turned and guided his fiancée toward the door, leaving Nora standing alone, a queen of a crumbling castle, clutching the fragments of her shattered life. 2 weeks later, Nora stood at the edge of a glittering sea of champagne flutes and designer gowns. The invitation to their annual Sterling Capital Gala had been a miracle, secured by a final, desperate call to a distant family friend. Her dress was borrowed. Her smile was a mask, and her stomach was a knot of anxiety. Jensen Group was hemorrhaging money, and this room was her last hope. filled with the very predators who might either save her or devour her company whole. She scanned the opulent ballroom, her eyes gliding past unfamiliar faces of the city's elite. Then, she saw him. He was standing with his back to her, part of a small, deferential circle of men. It was the posture that caught her first, the confident set of his shoulders, the way he held his head. Her heart gave a painful lurch. No, it can't be. When he turned, the air left her body in a silent gasp. It was Ethan's face. Older, harder, etched with a cold authority she'd never seen before. But it was his. The same strong jaw, the same dark hair, though now styled with a severe precision. A faint, silvery scar cut through his left eyebrow, a detail she didn't recognize. But the rest of him, it was a ghost made flesh. A man beside him clapped him on the shoulder. A brilliant move, Mr. Carson, absolutely brilliant, Mr. Carson. Neil Carson. The name meant nothing. But the face was everything. Forgetting her rehearsed business pitch, forgetting the investors she was supposed to charm, Nora moved as if pulled by an invisible string. Her legs felt unsteady, her pulse thundering in her ears. She broke through the circle, her eyes locked on his. Mr. Carson, she began, her voice cracking. The men around him turned, their expressions a mixture of surprise and annoyance. He looked at her, and for a terrifying second, there was nothing in his eyes. No recognition, just a flat, dismissive coldness. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a deep, unfamiliar baritone. "Do I know you?" The sound of it, so different from the gentle voice in her memories, was a physical blow. That she couldn't be wrong, she wouldn't be. Desperation clawed at her throat. "Ethan," she whispered, taking a half-step closer. "It's me. It's Nora." Her hand flew to her own, pulling at the simple gold band on her finger. "Look. Our wedding ring. I never took it off." Her words tumbled out in a frantic rush. "You're alive? How is this possible? Our son, Leo, he needs you." Neil Carson's face remained a mask of stone. A flicker of something, pain, anger, flashed in his eyes before being extinguished. He took a deliberate step back, creating a chasm between them. "I don't know who you are," he stated, his voice now dangerously low and clear, each word a perfectly polished stone of rejection, "but you are clearly confused. Or worse, a lunatic." He raised a hand, signaling a pair of burly security guards nearby. "I believe this woman is harassing me. Please see that she is removed." The guards were on her in an instant, their grips firm on her upper arms. The murmurs of the crowd swelled around her, their curious glances turning to pity and disdain. Humiliation, hot and suffocating, washed over her. "No, Ethan, please," she cried, struggling against them. "It's me." He didn't even watch her go. He simply turned back to his conversation as if swatting away a fly, his profile a study in brutal indifference. As they dragged her across the polished marble floor, her heels scraping, a desperate pleas echoing in the cavernous room, Nora's heart shattered into a million pieces. They threw her out into the cold night air, the heavy doors closing with a final, definitive thud. She collapsed onto the steps, the tears she'd held back for so long finally breaking free. He had looked right through her. He had called her a lunatic. And yet, beneath the crushing weight of his rejection and the world-tilting shock, a single, stubborn thought took root. It was him. She knew it was him. The blinding flash of a dozen cameras was a physical assault, each pop a punctuation mark on her public humiliation. Reporters swarmed like vultures, their questions sharp and merciless. "Ms. Jensen, is it true your company is filing for bankruptcy?" Was that outburst a sign of a mental breakdown? Who was the man you were screaming at? Nora stumbled back, the name Neil Carson echoing in her mind, a discordant note in the symphony of her grief for Ethan. Whispers followed her retreat to the car, cruel, cutting remarks about the fallen heiress, the desperate widow losing her mind. She slammed the door, the cacophony of the world replaced by the deafening thrum of her own heartbeat. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, her reflection in the rearview mirror a stranger's face pale, hollowed out, and fractured. It wasn't him. It couldn't be. The man at the gala was a phantom of power and ice, his eyes holding a coldness she had never seen in Ethan's. Yet, beneath that glacial exterior, a flicker of something familiar had ignited a desperate hope. The precise line of his jaw, the way his shoulders squared when he was challenged, was her grief so profound it was conjuring ghosts in crowded rooms? Or was her intuition screaming a truth her mind refused to accept? The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and tears, each mile deepening the chasm between her sanity and the wild, impossible hope that Ethan was alive. The house felt cavernous and cold without him. The silence was an entity of its own, thick with memories. It was broken by the soft patter of small feet. James, her 4-year-old son, stood in the doorway of the living room, his favorite teddy bear clutched in one hand, his thumb in his mouth. His big, brown eyes, so much like Ethan's, were wide and swimming with unused tears. "Mommy." His voice was a tiny, fragile thing. "I missed Daddy's pancakes." He looked down at his feet, his lower lip trembling. "When is Daddy coming home?" The question shattered what was left of Nora's composure. She knelt, pulling him into an embrace so tight it was almost painful. She buried her face in his soft hair, inhaling the scent of him, the only piece of Ethan she had left. For weeks, she had offered placating lies and gentle deflections, but looking at her son's heartbroken face, she knew that wasn't enough. A new, unyielding resolve began to calcify around her broken heart. She pulled back, wiping his tears with her thumbs. "He is alive, James," she said, her voice raw but steady, a vow spoken into the universe. "I don't know where he is, but he is alive. And Mommy is going to find him. We are going to get him back. I promise." Fueled by that promise, she stormed back to what was supposed to be her marital home the next day, only to find the locks change. After a frantic call, Colin finally answered, his voice thick with smug satisfaction. When she forced her way in through a back door she knew he'd forgotten, the sight that greeted her stole the air from her lungs. Colin was lounging on her bed, a half-dressed woman giggling beside him. The room, once a sanctuary of her marriage, was littered with champagne bottles and discarded clothes. It was a desecration. Well, look what the cat dragged in," Colin sneered, not bothering to sit up. "Come to beg for a few scraps, Nora. I'm afraid you're too late. Get out of my house," she seethed, her hands clenched into fists. He laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "Your house? Oh, sweetheart, this house, the company, all those shares you so trustingly signed over to me for safekeeping, it's all mine now. It was always the plan. You were just a convenient, grief-stricken fool to help me get it." He picked up a glass of champagne from the nightstand. "I even used Ethan's stolen designs to secure the final acquisition. Ironic, isn't it? The dead man paving my way to the top." The confession, so brazen and vile, left her reeling. He was untouchable, and he knew it. He had won. "A snake, you say?" The voice was low, resonant, and cut through the tension in the room like a surgeon's scalpel. Both Nora and Colin turned. Standing in the bedroom doorway was Neil Carson, flanked by 2 imposing men in sharp suits. He was the personification of authority. His gaze, cold and deliberate, was fixed on Colin. "I believe you're in my house," he continued, taking a slow step into the room. His eyes swept over the scene with undisguised contempt before landing back on Colin, whose face had drained of all color. And you've been running my company into the ground. He held up a tablet, the screen glowing. On it were design schematics intricate, brilliant, and time-stamped 5 years prior. They were Ethan's. These designs, you stole them from me, Colin. Right after my accident. You thought I was gone, that no one would ever know. You used my work to build a house of cards, and now it's time to pay the rent. As if on cue, uniformed officers appeared behind him. Cullen scrambled off the bed, his arrogance dissolving into pure panic. You can't do this. This is a misunderstanding. I have lawyers. His blustering protests faded down the hallway as he was swiftly apprehended, his grand scheme crumbling into dust around him. The room fell into a heavy silence. The other woman had scurried away, leaving only Nora and the man who was both a stranger and the center of her world. He finally turned to her, and for the first time, the icy mask of Neil Carson cracked. In his eyes, she saw it all: the years of pain, the bitter sting of betrayal, the ghost of the man she had loved. He was Ethan Quinn. He took a step closer, the space between them charged with unspoken history. His voice was softer now, laced with a weariness that seemed to age him. Our company, he said, a word hanging in the air, a bridge between two lifetimes, is finally going public. He held her gaze, his expression a complex map of hurt and determination. From now on, we'll face all the storms together.